I'm starting this product still in its box because not only is it quite stylish, but it also lets me pretend briefly that I'm Lou at Unbox Therapy with a few differences. Now, let's see. Baseball cap, yep. Glasses, yep. Beard, yep. So that's all good. Boxes of really expensive electronic stuff. Oh, right, okay. Maybe it's not Unbox Therapy. Maybe it's more like Unbox Scandal. So I've got my light. I've got my ginger beer reinforced with rum. Let us have an unboxing session of what is the entirely cheapest complete LED bulkhead light fitting I could find on eBay and cost £5. Well, less than £5. So let's slide this out. It's got a horrible plate at the back. It's got a very crinkly bag. What else has it got? The box goes down there. It's got screws, 3 screws to hold it onto your ceiling. It's got instructions all in Chinese. That's okay. I could use a translator on them, but I don't think I'll need that. And it's got the ubiquitous crinkly bag. I shall put that well out the way so it doesn't crinkle too much. So here it is. Here is the cheapest bulkhead light fitting on eBay, and this one actually cost £4.97. I'm noticing there are actually cheaper ones. That's maybe I should get a cheaper one as well. And it's described as, well, it's available from 5 watt up to 20 watt. I chose just the cheapest, shittiest 5 watt one. And it came from, well, I would tell you who it came from, Machine World 20 something. It's right off the edge of the page again. That's because I'm printing from the Chromebook, and I have to say its scaling isn't quite perfect. But anyway, here it is. It's a cheap light fitting that cost £5. What do you expect for £5? So it's got, well, I tell you what, first thing I'm noticing is just how light this is. It is absolutely feather light. And the top here, when you pick it out, it squishes. It really is. It's like the top is just a sort of really thin plastic. And likewise, the metal at the back crinkles as well. It's got these catches. Are these for releasing it? Yes, they are. Okay, this is just unbelievably flimsy. Okay, down that goes. We've got the classic arrangement. We've got the little power supply in the middle that quite nicely it plugs in. This is not central. I'm also noticing that it's got a metal plate, what looks like an aluminium core PCB, and no grounding facility. It's just got 2 wires going into the driver. The driver says 4 to 7 watt, input 85 to 265 volt, universal power supply, output 230 milliamp, 40 to 80 volt. Okay. Right, okay, let's test this then. No earth. I have to say, if you get one of these, I'd recommend ground it in some way. How could you ground it? You could possibly use one of these screws if you kept it well clear of the tracks underneath, or you could use one of the screws that holds this onto the case, or indeed the screw that holds it onto the ceiling, but I would recommend grounding metal plates if you have that facility at your lighting outlet. Anyway, let's get the power meter. It says 5 watts. Let's bring the hoppy in. Let's just jam the wires right into the hoppy. That's about the easiest way to connect it. So I'll just jam them into the little connector at the bottom. And plug it in and see what happens. It's lit. Doesn't look super mega bright. Where's that cover? I want to see it with the cover on now. Noting that this plate is not grounded. I suppose ultimately it's recessed out of touch, but you know, yeah. Okay, it's not super bright. I mean, it is lit up. Let's unplug it. Yeah, it's visibly lit up. That's about it. It's not very powerful. It says it's 3.4 watts total dissipation. Okay. Righty-ho. So how are the LEDs in this wired? I'm guessing just one series string. Although if it says it's about 230 milliamps. There's the connector there. It's going... Oh, the LEDs are wired in parallel pairs. Oh, hold on. Where's the meter? Let's short it out and see what current's actually going through it. So let's get this round to the DC. I'll try 200 milliamps initially. If it's too above that, I'll round it down. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that much power. Let's plug this in and short out an LED. And I would reckon that when I short out an LED with this now, 2 of the LEDs are going to go out. They have, but they're still glowing. That's odd. 166 milliamps. Okay, so what's the voltage across that then? 166 milliamps, unless it's a fairly choppy, unsmooth output. Let's measure the voltage across the output of this. .79 volts. Okay, that's kind of not really tallying up with the power supply here. I wonder if that's just a generic case they've used. I think we should explore this further. 15 volts times, what's that, about 200 something? Was that 100? I can't remember, 180 milliamps? I don't know, that's not tallying up with what this thing's showing. Screwdriver. So let's remove the power supply first. Let's just remove everything, in fact. So that's the power supply off. It should unplug. I noticed the wires have just slid out. Oh. I'm kind of intrigued to see what's in here now. I get the feeling, given the voltage and the current, I get the feeling this is going to be one of these little, you know the power supplies you find in the back of the GU10 lamps, the 3-watt GU10s? I get the feeling it's going to be one of those. Spudger, I don't see my spudger immediately, so I shall... Oh, I've seen it. Okay, spudger. Ah, it is. Oh, it's actually a wee bit bigger. Is that capacitor holding a charge? No. 3.3 megafarad, 400 volt. Is that a bright power chip or one of the similar type chips? It says SR2830. I'm not sure if we're going to get that. SR2830. Right. Not familiar with that. The output here is directly connected to one leg of the capacitor. That means it's not an isolated supply like you find in little GU10 lamps. This looks like it's a buck regulator. It is. Look, it's got only 2 connections in the choke. Okay, so let's investigate that. I shall find out what that chip is. Is this aluminium substrate, is it heat sink mounted onto the metal panel? Does it have thermal tape or compound? It's only got 2 screws for a start. No, it's no thermal compound. That is just like, that feels like a food tin lid. It is so thin. Okay, so it's using fairly standard components. I'm going to go and check and see what I can find out about that chip. So I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I didn't find a PDF, but I did find a single image that covered basically the data sheet for this. It is a standard chip and it is a buck regulator. I also took the opportunity to weigh this whole thing. The whole fitting complete weighs 145 grams or 5 ounces. It really is that light. Compare that with, let me see if I can find one down here. There we go. Compare that with this really solid bulkhead type fitting that is actually really meaty. This one, it's maybe an unfair comparison because it is a somewhat higher power. Oh. But this one has the huge aluminium panel LED, so it is considerably higher power. This one I thought was an emergency LED when I light fitting because of some misleading text when I bought it, but it turned out not to be. It came from a more prominent supplier. The difference is this fitting here weighs 1 pound, 11 ounces, or 774 grams. But having said that, keep in mind that all fittings that have unchangeable lamps in them, at least in a sense, this little cheapy Chinese one, you can change the whole fitting, or people like you and me, we can get new LED rings for it. In fact, you know what? If you wanted to get a 12-volt version, you could get some of the angel eyes for cars, and you could actually fit them in instead, or just a row of bits of LED tape, and of any colour you wanted. It would be a nice, robust, bouncy, unbreakable sort of light fitting for that application. Crushable, but unbreakable. So here's the data sheet. Let's zoom in this. It is in Chinese, but that's okay. We can see what we need from the schematic here. It effectively just uses 3 pins, and this is very similar to these little 3-pin TO92 package drivers you get that are designed. They have the same function, but this one is maybe just rated a bit higher power with its 8-pin chip. So we get the bridge rectifier coming in. That's this component here. We've got the smoothing capacitor, which is this component here. And then all the chip requires after that is a sense resistor, which is 1.8 ohms. Let's get a screwdriver and point to that. That's this resistor down here. And once again, it's got the double position in parallel so you can fine tune that value. Then it's got a little smoothing capacitor, which is basically so it derives its own power supply from the circuitry inside here. The output has the diode, the inductor, so there's the diode there, inductor, and then the output, it's got a capacitor for the LEDs, and then it's got a resistor across that, 150k, which isn't shown in the schematic. The capacitor is very small, so the output might have been quite ripply, I'm not sure, it's just a small ceramic one. I guess ultimately it's low voltage and it's high frequency, so it's not that critical. But it is not an isolated supply. I suppose it doesn't need to be. It's in this box. So, yeah, it's interesting. It does make me wonder that, you know, this is very much in the direction of disposable light fittings, where once the fittings, if it fails, instead of just being able to go and put a lamp in it, you actually have to either start doing physical repairs inside it. You know, actually, in our case, we'd just be soldering, well, either bridging out LEDs, putting new LEDs in, or just getting complete new LED rings off eBay to put in. Or you have to just take the whole thing off the ceiling and then bin it and put a new one up, which seems a step backwards somehow, because the reliability of these is not as great as that. And I'm inclined to think, you know, this, in a sense, because this is so lightweight and cheap and plasticky, actually, you know what, I've just suddenly thought of something. I want to actually power this from the bench power supply. Because this is so cheap and plasticky, it means that ultimately, you know, it is a disposable item. You know, it's very light. It's not a huge amount of materials that are getting thrown out. It's not got the big circuit board inside this fake driver box, which is very reminiscent of these boxes that look as though they got a big driver in them. But again, they've just got these tiny little GU10 style modules inside them. The module is bigger than the sort of typical GU10 one. But, much less plastic and metal, so when you do throw it out, it's going to, you know, it's not going to be as environmentally bad. Although, you know, I wonder how long the LEDs will last. And as I say, people like us, we can fix these. So let's select on the power supply here. Let's connect this up just out of interest, because it is quite a low voltage. I may just, it's going to be quite tricky to connect onto here. I'm going to connect positive to there, negative to there, and we'll see what point it lights up. It's got 5 circuits at 5 pairs of LEDs. It starts lighting up round about the 12 volt mark, but very, very dimly. And to get a similar current to what we had, you know what? That is, to get a similar current to what we had, which is about 180 milliamps, I think it was it 160 milliamps? No, that is about 160 milliamps, is 16 volts. Interesting. In a way. So, I have to say the temptation is, if you wanted to throw this in the bin after you'd bought, you know, if you'd taken it down, could you literally crumple this up because it is so thin? The temptation is to see just how disposable this light fitting is by crumpling it. Seriously. This would crush into quite a small space, and this cover here, it's kind of brittle, but yeah, you can just crumple it up and throw it in the bin. So yes, it's a completely disposable light fitting. I feel slightly guilty for doing that. I'm actually almost tempted to buy one of the higher current power ones. But yeah, it is just literally for £5. Instead of buying a lamp, you're buying a complete light fitting that is unfortunately a disposable light fitting that you have to use tools to actually, instead of changing the lamp, you have to change the whole fitting. But there you go. It's an interesting direction to go.